Few musicals have captured hearts quite like Oliver, a film that somehow transformed one of Charles Dickens' darkest novels into a joyous Oscar-winning spectacle. Directed by Carol Reed, it brought Lionel Bart's beloved stage musical to the big screen in spectacular fashion. But beneath the bright costumes and unforgettable songs lay a production far more complicated and fascinating than audiences ever imagined. And it starts with something most viewers never suspected. The very voice carrying this story forward may not have been quite what it seemed. Number 1. Oliver's voice wasn't his. The boy at the center of Oliver captivated audiences with his angelic voice, but that voice belonged to someone else entirely. Mark Lester, the young actor cast as Oliver Twist, was not actually singing the songs heard on screen. His vocals were dubbed by Kathy Green, the daughter of musical supervisor Johnny Green, and the secret was kept so effectively that most viewers had no idea for years after the film's release. The decision wasn't made out of distrust in Lester's abilities. It was simply practical. Dubbing child performers in large-scale musicals was common during the era, particularly when the vocal demands of the score exceeded what a young actor could reliably deliver across months of filming. The songs required a purity and consistency difficult to guarantee from any child. What makes the illusion so remarkable is how completely convincing it was. Lester's expressive face and physical performance matched the dubbed vocals so naturally that audiences were fully convinced they were watching one seamless portrayal. It wasn't until Lester himself spoke publicly about it years later that the secret finally came to light, a testament to how perfectly the two performances had been blended into one. Number 2. The only G-rated Best Picture. The rating seems almost impossible to believe at first glance. The film depicts a world of pickpockets, criminal gangs, poverty-stricken orphans, and brutal violence. And yet, the Motion Picture Association of America awarded it a G rating, making it suitable for all audiences. More remarkably, it went on to win Best Picture at the Academy Awards, making it the only G-rated film in history to claim that honor. To understand how this happened, it helps to remember that the American rating system was brand new in 1968. The MPAA had only just introduced its classification system that year, replacing the older production code. The early categories were broadly defined, and a G simply meant no content deemed inappropriate for general audiences, a threshold that apparently still allowed for poverty, crime, and on-screen menace. Modern viewers are often genuinely surprised by that classification. The fate of Nancy, the grim conditions of the workhouse, and the threatening presence of Bill Sikes create an atmosphere far darker than most contemporary G-rated productions. Yet in its era, the musical framing, the absence of explicit content, and the film's overall moral resolution were enough to satisfy the new system. The contradiction between rating and content has only made the movie more fascinating to film historians over the decades. Number 3. The Peter Sellers Casting Battle. Long before cameras rolled, the road to the finished film was far more complicated than audiences ever knew. The rights to Lionel Bart's stage musical had passed through several hands, and with them came competing visions for how the story should be told on screen. At one point, Peter Sellers, one of Britain's most celebrated comedic actors, was reportedly in serious consideration for the role of Fagin, which would have produced a dramatically different production. Sellers was a dominant force in 1960s cinema, and his interpretation of the character would almost certainly have leaned into broad comedy, rather than the theatrical intensity Ron Moody eventually brought to the role. Producers and studios wrestled over tone, budget, and creative direction for some time before the project settled into its final shape. These negotiations determined not just who would star, but what kind of film it would ultimately become. The casting debate reflects a wider truth about how major productions take shape, often through a series of near misses and abandoned directions the audience never sees. Had Sellers stepped into the role, the entire energy of the film might have shifted beyond recognition. The Fagin that generations came to love was far from inevitable. It emerged through a process of argument, compromise, and fortunate circumstance. Number 4. 2,000 boys auditioned for Oliver. Few casting searches in British film history match the scale of what producers undertook to find their lead. Over 2,000 boys were reportedly auditioned for the role of Oliver Twist, a number that reflects just how much pressure the filmmakers felt to find exactly the right face, voice, and presence to carry the entire production on young shoulders. The role demanded something rare. Oliver had to appear genuinely vulnerable without becoming irritating, sympathetic without being saccharine, and expressive enough to hold his own against seasoned adult performers in a grand musical. These qualities are difficult to find in any actor, let alone a child. The audition process became a lengthy and exhausting search that spread across Britain. Mark Lester ultimately emerged from that enormous field and secured the part. His quiet, almost ethereal quality, wide eyes, fair features, and a natural stillness on screen gave Oliver exactly the kind of innocent fragility the filmmakers needed. What he may have lacked in vocal range, he more than compensated for with a screen presence that proved genuinely affecting. The search had been enormous, but when the right boy finally walked in, the decision apparently came quickly. Number 5. The producer who never saw it. Every great film carries invisible contributions from people who never lived to see their work on screen. James Wolfe was one of the driving forces behind bringing Oliver to cinema, a seasoned producer with deep roots in British film who had championed the project from its earliest stages. He passed away in March 1966 before a single frame had been shot, leaving the production without one of its key architects. The loss was significant. Wolfe had been instrumental in securing rights, assembling talent, and steering the project toward the big screen. His death forced an immediate reorganization of responsibilities at a critical moment in the film's development, and serious questions arose about whether the production would continue at all in its intended form. It was his brother, John Wolfe, who stepped forward to ensure the film reached completion. Already an established and respected producer in his own right, John carried the project through its remaining challenges and all the way to its eventual Oscar triumph. The film that audiences celebrated at the 1969 Academy Awards was therefore also a quiet tribute to the brother who had set it all in motion, a man who dedicated years to a project he would never get to see. Number 6. Nancy was discovered on TV. There are moments in casting history where a single television appearance changes everything. Shawnee Wallace had been working as a performer across British stages and variety circuits for years, but it was her appearance on The Ed Sullivan Show in the United States that caught the attention of the right people at exactly the right moment. That one performance was enough to put her directly in front of the producers searching for Nancy. The Ed Sullivan Show was one of the most powerful platforms in entertainment during the 1960s. Broadcast to millions of American households each week, it served as a launching pad for careers and a validation stage for established talent alike. For a British performer, appearing on it carried significant weight. It signaled a level of professionalism and stage presence that translated clearly across cultural boundaries. Wallace brought a warmth and emotional depth to Nancy that proved essential to the film's balance. The character needed to be both resilient and heartbreaking, a woman who understood her circumstances yet remained fiercely loyal and loving. Her performance became one of the most praised elements of the finished picture, earning her a Golden Globe nomination. The television appearance that started it all was a small moment with enormous consequences. Number 7. 3 directors nearly made it. The name behind the camera can define a film entirely, and for much of its early development, this production might have carried a very different name in that credit. Brian Forbes and Lewis Gilbert were both linked to the project at various stages, and either could have steered it in a substantially different direction. The director's chair changed hands more than once before Carol Reed finally took his seat. Forbes was a respected figure in British cinema with a sharp eye for character-driven drama, while Gilbert had demonstrated considerable range across genres. Both would have brought genuine talent to the project, but neither ultimately guided it to the screen. Scheduling conflicts, creative disagreements, and the complicated business of assembling such a large production all played a role in the departures. Reed's arrival proved to be exactly what the film needed. Already the director of classics like The Third Man and Odd Man Out, he brought a deep understanding of atmosphere and performance that gave Oliver its distinctive visual character. His ability to manage both intimate emotional moments and massive choreographed sequences simultaneously was remarkable, and the Oscar he received for Best Director reflected how effectively he had brought this extraordinarily complex production together. Number 8. The contract that delayed filming. The stage version of a hit musical can be worth enormous sums of money, and protecting that income sometimes means holding the film world at arm's length for years. When the rights to Lionel Bart's Oliver were acquired for cinema, one crucial condition came attached. Filming could not begin until the London stage production had run its course and closed. The agreement was designed to protect the theater business from being undercut by a major film release. This kind of arrangement was not unusual in the era. Stage producers understood that a high-profile film version could hollow out audience interest in a live performance almost overnight. By delaying production, the theater run was allowed to reach its natural conclusion, and in the case of this musical, that run was long and highly profitable. The show had been a sensation on the London stage since 1960, and its commercial life was carefully guarded. The delay ultimately stretched the timeline by several years, complicating the careers and availability of nearly everyone attached to the project. Actors associated with the production early on found themselves wading through a prolonged limbo. When filming finally began, it did so with a cast and creative team that had shifted considerably from the earliest plans. Stage business politics had quietly shaped the entire production before a single rehearsal had taken place. Number 9. When the budget suddenly doubled. What began as an ambitious but manageable production quickly grew into something far more expensive than anyone had originally planned. Once sets were designed and musical numbers staged, it became clear that recreating Victorian London at the scale the story demanded would cost considerably more than early estimates suggested. The budget climbed toward approximately $10 million, a staggering figure for a British production of the era. The escalation was driven largely by the physical scale of the production design. Enormous street sets at Shepperton Studios required skilled craftspeople, vast quantities of materials, and months of construction work. Large crowd scenes and elaborate dance sequences added further layers of cost. Each creative ambition unlocked further financial commitment, and the line between grand vision and financial excess began to blur. The producers who backed that expansion were taking a significant gamble. A musical of that budget needed to perform at a very high level globally, just to break even, let alone turn a profit. The gamble paid off spectacularly when the film became a major international success and swept the Academy Awards. But during production, the mounting costs created real tension behind the scenes. The final picture may have looked effortless on screen, but the financial pressure quietly building beneath it was anything but. Number 10. The Roadshow Musical Experience. Going to see this film in 1968 was nothing like watching it at home today. Oliver was released as a roadshow production, a prestige format reserved for the biggest films of the era, in which tickets were sold in advance, seats were reserved, and the screening itself was designed to feel like a major theatrical event. Audiences arrived to an overture playing before the images had even begun. The roadshow experience included features that have almost entirely disappeared from modern cinema. Printed programs were often available for purchase. The film paused at an intermission, giving audiences time to rest before the second half. Exit music played as viewers left the auditorium. Every element was carefully designed to mirror attending a grand stage performance, reinforcing the musical's theatrical origins and elevating the occasion. This format was typically reserved for the most prestigious productions of the decade. Films like Lawrence of Arabia, 2001: A Space Odyssey, and Dr. Zhivago had all received similar treatment. Being placed in that company signaled how seriously the production was being positioned as a cultural event rather than simply another movie. The roadshow release helped establish the sense of occasion that contributed directly to its extraordinary awards campaign and lasting reputation. Number 11. London built inside a studio. Walking through the crowded markets, narrow alleys, and fog-laden streets of Victorian London in this film, it is almost impossible to believe that none of it was real. The entire world seen on screen was constructed from scratch at Shepperton Studios in Surrey, where production designer John Box and his team built one of the most elaborate studio environments in British film history. Real streets were never a viable option at the scale the musical demanded. The construction project was immense. Entire city blocks were built, cobblestone streets, market stalls, tavern facades, and detailed period architecture stretching across multiple studio stages and backlot areas. Hundreds of craftspeople worked for months to ensure that every visible surface matched the visual language of Dickensian London. The level of detail extended even to elements the camera would barely register. Working within a controlled studio environment gave the filmmakers significant creative advantages. Lighting could be precisely managed, choreography could be rehearsed on the actual sets before filming began, and weather was never a variable. This control was essential when staging the film's most complex musical numbers, where hundreds of performers needed to move in precise coordination across large spaces. The artificial London that emerged was ultimately more coherent and cinematic than any real location could have provided. Number 12. A crane invented for one shot. Some of the most breathtaking moments in cinema history came from filmmakers pushing technology to its absolute limit, and one of this film's most iconic sequences required exactly that. The enormous Consider Yourself number, featuring hundreds of performers filling the studio streets, demanded a camera movement that no existing equipment could adequately deliver. A specially constructed crane was built specifically to achieve the sweeping overhead shots the sequence required. The crane allowed the camera to rise high above the crowds and glide smoothly across the action below, capturing the full scale of the choreography in a single fluid motion. Without it, the sequence would have had to be broken into smaller, less impressive shots, fundamentally changing the sense of scale and celebration the filmmakers wanted to achieve. The investment in custom equipment reflected just how essential that visual approach was to the scene's success. The resulting footage became one of the most recognized images in the production's history. The ability to pull back and reveal the sheer number of performers filling the street gave the sequence an infectious energy that close-up filming could never have replicated. It was a technical solution born from creative necessity, and the fact that special equipment had to be invented simply to capture one number speaks to the extraordinary ambition running through every department of this production. Number 13. 80 costumes built a world. Clothing tells stories that dialogue cannot always convey. Costume designer Phyllis Dalton faced the challenge of dressing a cast of dozens across wildly different social strata. From the impoverished orphans of the workhouse to the comfortable middle classes to the ragged criminal underground of Fagin's den. The result was a wardrobe of approximately 80 distinct costumes, each one carefully considered as a piece of visual storytelling. Every fabric choice, color palette, and degree of wear carried deliberate meaning. The wealthy characters moved in structured, clean garments that projected order and authority. The working poor wore muted, practical clothing that spoke of survival without vanity. Fagin's gang occupied a visual middle ground, theatrical and chaotic, their patchwork clothing reflecting lives lived entirely outside society's rules. The distinction between worlds was visible at a glance, without a single word of explanation required. Dalton had previously won an Academy Award for her work on Dr. Zhivago, and her experience with large period productions showed in every detail of Oliver's visual design. The logistical challenge of tracking, maintaining, and coordinating that many costumes across months of filming was considerable, yet the wardrobe remained consistent and purposeful throughout. The finished film stands as evidence of how powerfully clothing can shape a viewer's understanding of character, long before an actor opens their mouth. Number 14. Fagin's look took 3 artists. Creating the visual identity of one of literature's most recognizable characters required precision, collaboration, and the kind of detailed work that rarely receives public attention. The distinctive appearance of Fagin in the film, the wild hair, the layered rags, the exaggerated features, was assembled through the combined efforts of a small but highly skilled team. Hairdresser Bobby Smith played a central role in developing the character's signature look. The challenge was to create a Fagin who felt theatrical and larger than life, without tipping into caricature that might undermine the performance. Ron Moody was pushing for a complex comedic interpretation of the character, and the visual design needed to support that approach. The hair and beard were carefully constructed to suggest eccentricity rather than pure menace, an important distinction that shaped how audiences received the character emotionally. The collaboration between Moody and the hair and makeup team became one of the quiet successes of the entire production. Small adjustments to how the character looked could shift audience perception considerably, and the team spent significant time calibrating every element. The final result, a Fagin who feels both grotesque and oddly endearing, was not arrived at by accident. It came from a sustained creative conversation between performance and appearance that continued throughout filming. Number 15. The continuity genius on set. Filming a musical out of sequence creates problems most viewers never think about. A performer might shoot the end of a scene one week and the beginning of that same scene weeks later, requiring every costume detail, prop placement, and physical element to match precisely across entirely separate shooting days. On this production, that enormous responsibility fell to continuity supervisor Pamela Davies, one of the most essential and least celebrated roles on the entire crew. Davies tracked an extraordinary volume of detail simultaneously. With large cast numbers involving hundreds of performers, every element had to be logged and carefully monitored. The position of a hat, the degree to which a coat was buttoned, the exact placement of props on a market stall, any inconsistency could undermine the seamless flow the finished film required. A single mismatched detail in a crowd scene might escape most viewers, but it would shatter the illusion for those paying close attention. The scale of the challenge on this particular production was unusual, even by the standards of major studio filmmaking. Large musical numbers were sometimes filmed across multiple days, with the same performers required to recreate precise movements and appearances each time. Davies' meticulous records and sharp eye ensured the film held together across months of complex, non-linear shooting. Her work represents the kind of invisible craftsmanship that defines the difference between a professional production and a chaotic one, experienced fully by every viewer, yet credited to no one they would ever recognize. Number 16. Winter was created in summer. Some of the film's most atmospherically convincing moments, the gray skies, the biting cold visible in every frame, were captured in the middle of a British summer. Several scenes requiring the bleak, frost-touched visual language of Victorian London were shot during warm weather, making the illusion of seasonal misery entirely the work of the production's special effects and lighting teams. The challenge of manufacturing winter indoors was considerable. Special effects artist Alan Bryce and his team used a combination of techniques to suggest freezing temperatures on screen. Lighting was adjusted to strip warmth from every shot, leaning into cooler tones that read as wintry even under studio conditions. Breath effects, frost-dusted surfaces, and carefully controlled atmospheric elements reinforced the sense of cold. Every visual cue that audiences associate with bitter weather was deliberately engineered rather than naturally present. The success of this deception speaks to how profoundly skilled production teams can manipulate perception. Viewers watching the workhouse sequences or the bleaker street scenes never question the temperature. The atmosphere feels genuinely cold and inhospitable. This had an important effect beyond simple realism. The manufactured winter amplified the film's emotional contrast, making the warmth of human connection within the story feel all the more powerful against its gray, hostile backdrop. Number 17. Oliver lost teeth during filming. Child actors present a unique challenge that no adult performer could ever create. They are literally changing as the camera rolls. Mark Lester was at exactly the age when baby teeth are lost and replaced, and the long production schedule meant that nature took its course while filming was still underway. Lester began losing teeth during the shoot, creating a continuity problem with no simple solution. The crew's response was practical and inventive. Custom dental plates were created to fill the gaps that appeared as Lester's teeth fell out naturally, ensuring that Oliver looked the same from one scene to the next, regardless of what was happening between shooting days. The plates had to be fitted carefully enough that they remained undetectable on screen, sitting naturally within Lester's expressions, without affecting his performance. It is a small detail that most viewers would never consider, yet it represents the kind of invisible problem-solving that keeps a production running smoothly. The months-long shoot that generated so many other logistical challenges, from costume continuity to set construction, also created this entirely biological continuity puzzle. That the finished film shows no trace of the issue is a tribute to the crew's resourcefulness. Oliver's face remains consistent throughout, betraying nothing of the very human process of growing up happening just behind the camera. Number 18. Why the Dodger Stood on Lifts. At the heart of the film's energy sits a friendship built on opposites, the confident, streetwise Dodger guiding a bewildered Oliver through the criminal underworld. On paper, the casting of Jack Wilde alongside Mark Lester seemed perfect. In practice, it created an unexpected physical problem. Wilde was noticeably shorter than Lester, which threatened to undermine the visual authority the Dodger needed to project on screen. The solution was quiet and practical. Hidden lifts, discrete platform additions placed inside or beneath Wilde's footwear, were used during certain scenes to bring his eyeline closer to Lester's. The adjustment was subtle enough that audiences never noticed it, yet it made a significant difference in how the two characters read against each other. The Dodger needed to feel like the experienced elder guide, not a figure looking up at the boy he was supposed to be leading. Wilde's performance was so charismatic and naturally confident that the physical adjustment was quickly forgotten by everyone watching. His portrayal earned him an Academy Award nomination for Best Supporting Actor and launched his career significantly. The lifts were a minor technical fix for what turned out to be one of the film's most beloved performances, a small reminder that cinema is always on some level a carefully managed illusion, and that the best illusions are the ones that require no effort at all to believe. Number 19. The fake ear prank on set. Not every moment on a major film set is serious business. Even within the pressure of a large, expensive production, cast members find ways to inject humor into the process, and one particular prank on this set became a story retold for decades afterward. The incident involved actor Harry Secombe, who played Mr. Bumble, and a very convincing prosthetic ear that found its way onto young Mark Lester's head during a scene rehearsal. The fake ear had been applied to Lester convincingly enough that it appeared entirely real. When Secombe reached out and grabbed it as part of the scene, the ear came away cleanly in his hand. The shock on his face was reportedly genuine and immediate. A man who had spent his entire career in comedy found himself genuinely startled by a well-executed practical joke, and the laughter that followed apparently echoed across the entire set. The story has survived as one of the more charming footnotes in the production's behind-the-scenes history. Shoots of this size and complexity generate enormous amounts of pressure, and the ability of a cast to find levity within that pressure often reflects the health of the working environment. That a moment of such pure silliness could flourish in the middle of one of the most technically demanding British films of the decade says something warm about the atmosphere Carol Reed managed to create. Number 20. The scene lost after 40 takes. Perfection can be an expensive pursuit, and occasionally the effort to achieve it ends in nothing at all. One scene during production reportedly required approximately 40 separate attempts before the crew came close to being satisfied. The sequence involved props that needed to fall in precise positions, demanding exact timing and physical coordination that proved almost impossible to replicate consistently across take after take. The scale of effort put into that sequence makes its eventual fate all the more striking. After the exhausting process of approaching a satisfactory take, a single mistake, a misdelivered line at the critical moment, rendered the best footage unusable. With the patience of the crew stretched and the complexity of resetting the scene too great, the decision was made to abandon the sequence entirely. It never appeared in the finished film. Lost scenes are a quiet feature of almost every major production, moments that consumed time, energy, and resources without ever reaching an audience. This example is a concentrated illustration of how filmmaking can devour effort without producing results. The 40 takes left no trace on screen, absorbed entirely by the cutting room floor. yet the story of their existence has survived, passed down through the production's history as a reminder that some of the most demanding work in cinema is the work that audiences will never see. Number 21. 17 takes for one song. Repetition is built into the nature of filmmaking, but some sequences demand a level of repetition that tests even the most experienced performers. The filming of I'd Do Anything, one of the production's most energetic and joyful musical numbers, required 17 separate takes before the crew had footage they were satisfied with. The sequence involved multiple performers, precise choreography, and a level of coordination that made consistency extremely difficult to maintain. What made the process particularly punishing was the temperature. The studio conditions during filming were described as intensely hot, turning what should have been a celebratory sequence into a physical endurance test. Performers worked through the number again and again in stifling heat, maintaining energy and precision despite exhaustion. The combination of technical demands and uncomfortable conditions stretched the shoot across an uncommonly long day. The outcome carried an irony that the crew found difficult to ignore. After 17 attempts and hours of effort under difficult conditions, the filmmakers reviewed their footage and determined that one of the earliest takes was the strongest. The performances captured before exhaustion had set in possessed a freshness and spontaneity that later attempts, technically more polished but visibly more tired, simply could not match. All the effort that followed that early take had produced nothing better. It is a lesson filmmakers relearn on almost every production, yet somehow always have to discover again. That the first instinct, captured before self-consciousness sets in, is often the one worth keeping. Number 22. Ron Moody reinvented Fagin. The version of Fagin that audiences fell in love with was not the version that existed on the page in earlier stage traditions or in the expectations of the producers. It was a creation almost entirely driven by the actor himself. Ron Moody arrived with firm convictions about how the character should be played, and a determination to resist the more one-dimensional interpretations that had defined Fagin in previous adaptations. What he built in place of those templates became one of cinema's most memorable performances. Moody's central argument was that Fagin needed to be genuinely funny, not in a way that softened his moral complexity, but in a way that made him perversely charming. He pushed for a theatrical, almost vaudevillian energy that audiences could enjoy even while recognizing the darkness underneath. This required a delicate calibration. Too far toward comedy, and the character lost credibility. Too far toward menace, and the musical's tone would fracture entirely. The performance that emerged walked that line with extraordinary precision. Moody received an Academy Award nomination for Best Actor, a rare achievement for a comedic performance in a musical role, and his portrayal has remained the defining screen interpretation of the character. The Fagin of the finished film bears Moody's fingerprints in every gesture, every line reading, and every instinct. That the character feels so fully realized is not an accident of casting. It is the result of one actor's refusal to settle for the obvious version, and a reminder that the most lasting performances are rarely the ones anyone saw coming. Number 23. The feud behind Fagin. Creative tension does not always destroy a production. Sometimes it sharpens it into something better than anyone originally imagined. The disagreements surrounding Fagin's portrayal began before filming even started, rooted in a fundamental difference of opinion between Ron Moody and composer Lionel Bart about what the character should be. Bart had created Fagin for the stage with a particular vision in mind, and Moody's determination to reshape that vision created friction that occasionally became quite heated during rehearsals. Bart's instincts leaned toward a more grounded, dramatically serious interpretation of the character. Moody's vision was theatrical and comedic in a way Bart felt risked undercutting the story's emotional weight. Neither man was entirely wrong. Both were protecting something genuine about what made the character compelling. But their arguments reflected incompatible starting points, and the tension between them lingered through much of the production's preparation. What happened in practice was that the resistance Moody faced pushed him to refine and defend his choices more rigorously than he might otherwise have done. Every instinct was tested, every comedic choice had to survive scrutiny, and the performance that emerged from that pressure was more precisely calibrated as a result. The friction between two strong creative personalities produced something neither might have achieved alone. Bart's musical and Moody's performance are now inseparable in the public imagination, a legacy built, in part, on the foundation of their disagreement. Great art, it turns out, is sometimes forged in exactly the heat that threatens to consume it. Number 24. The Oscar that didn't exist. Winning an Academy Award is among the highest recognitions in cinema, but what happens when the category that should honor your work simply does not exist? Choreographer Anna White faced exactly that situation in 1969. Her work on the film's musical numbers, the intricate staging of sequences involving hundreds of performers across enormous studio sets, was widely regarded as one of the production's defining creative achievements. Yet choreography had never been established as an official Oscar category. The Academy's response was unusual and telling. Rather than allowing the oversight to stand, the organization created a special honorary award specifically to recognize White's contribution. It was a rare acknowledgement that the existing categories had failed to account for a genuine artistic achievement, and a signal of just how exceptional her work had been considered by those within the industry. White's choreography had shaped the film's most iconic moments. The precision required to coordinate large groups of performers within the constraints of period-accurate staging while simultaneously serving the emotional needs of each number represented a form of filmmaking craftsmanship that deserved recognition on its own terms. The honorary Oscar she received has since become one of the more interesting footnotes in Academy history, a moment when the institution bent its own rules rather than let remarkable work go unacknowledged. It remains a testament to how completely the film's creative ambition exceeded the frameworks designed to celebrate it, and a quiet argument for why those frameworks occasionally need to grow. Number 25. The film keeps being rediscovered. Some films belong to the moment of their release and fade quietly into history. Others refuse to stay in the past. Oliver belongs firmly to the second category, a production that has been periodically restored, rescreened, and reintroduced to new audiences across more than 5 decades, each rediscovery revealing something that earlier versions had obscured or lost. The film's journey since 1968 is almost a story in its own right. Modern restoration work has returned visual detail to sequences that earlier prints had softened or degraded over time. The elaborate textures of John Box's sets, Phyllis Dalton's costumes, and the carefully manufactured atmosphere of the studio streets can now be seen with a clarity closer to what original audiences experienced in 1968. Events like screenings at the BFI London Film Festival have placed the film in front of contemporary viewers who encounter it not as nostalgia, but as a genuine discovery. What continues to draw people back is not simply sentiment. The film holds together as a piece of craft in ways that reward close attention. The production design, the choreography, the performances, and the musical arrangements all operate at a level that remains impressive, regardless of era. Each generation that finds Oliver tends to find something slightly different in it. A musical, a period drama, a technical marvel, or simply a story about a child searching for belonging in an indifferent world. That capacity to mean different things to different people across such a long stretch of time is the quietest and most durable secret of all, and the surest sign that some stories are simply too alive to ever stay buried. What Oliver achieved in 1968 goes far beyond the 6 Oscars it took home that night. Behind every iconic song and every cobblestone street was a production held together by ingenuity, stubbornness, and the kind of craftsmanship that rarely makes it into the history books. Dubbed voices, invented cranes, fake teeth, feuding creatives, and a budget that doubled before anyone could stop it. None of it shows on screen. What shows is the magic. And that gap between the chaos behind the camera and the seamless wonder in front of it is precisely what makes the story of this film so remarkable. Dickens wrote about survival against impossible odds, and in a quiet way, so did the people who made this movie. Every challenge that threatened to derail the production was absorbed, solved, or transformed into something that made the finished film stronger. That is the real secret hidden beneath all 25. If this journey through the making of a classic left you wanting more, hit like and subscribe so you never miss another deep dive into the films that shaped cinema. And drop a comment below telling us which classic film you think deserves the 25 Secrets treatment next.